unless it's going to go. Maybe it just went.
Welcome to Teamwork, a Better Way, the podcast filled with stories, experiences, and insights from leading high-performing team experts. Here are your hosts, Spencer Horn and Christian Napier.
Well, good morning, everyone. Happy day after Labor Day. It's great to be with you all. I'm Christian Napier. He is Spencer Horn, the man in the most colorful shirt I can imagine, which contrasts nicely with that very monochromatic background you've got.
Yeah, well, I wanted to have a little bit of bright effervescence because I don't have all my lights yet set up in my new office, and I spent Labor Day laboring to. We moved into our new house as I said last time, and it's what a I'm glad I don't have to do this for a long time. Fingers crossed, right? But we moved in over a weekend and then promptly went out of town for a week and came back to just boxes and mayhem. So my office is getting there, but it's not all set up. So I wanted to add some color. How was your Labor Day weekend?
Well, I'm here in a black shirt, so I don't know if that's reflective of anything. It was relaxed. As you know, we had a lot of rain yesterday, and so uh, our son-in-law and our daughter flew in for the weekend from Seattle, so it was nice to have them here, and I think
Oh
they brought
wow,
the
that's
rain with
great.
them. So we had a lot of rain, but it was a nice, relaxing holiday. Great to spend it with family.
Oh, I love that. Well, good for you. So we have an important topic today.
We do, and I want to know how you came up with the title of our podcast today. That was pretty hilarious when you sent it to me. Hey, should we call it this? I'm like, hey, yeah, let's do it.
Well, I think that middle managers. The title is, if you haven't read it, stop giving middle managers the middle finger. And I think middle managers get a bad rap, and in popular culture and in shows like The Office, you've got I don't even I can't even bring myself to watch The Office because it creates I feel like I turn apoplectic. I mean, I just can't stand the stupidity, and so I, that's my own issues with comedies and stuff. But it is obviously a story about Steve Carell, who in UK has their own version, but here in the US, Steve Carell is this middle manager for this Pennsylvania paper company, and he's completely inept and not self-aware, and the office is just mayhem. And so that is often our caricature or picture of what a middle manager is. And then you add people who are in the news every day, like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, and how they feel about middle managers. Maybe you can share about that. And they don't get a good rap, do they?
No, they kind of get it from both ends, right? I mean, they get it from the line staff or frontline managers, and then
Right.
they also get it from the C-suite, the executives, and so it becomes easy for someone to parody, like the writers of
Sure.
The Office, to parody it because they are picked on quite a bit. Really, the inspiration for this conversation was an article that was published in SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Management, which references a study done by McKinsey earlier this year looking at middle managers. And
Yeah.
there were a lot of insightful things. And I shared this article with you, Spencer, and you're like, hey, this is a great topic. So I'm curious, what was it that initially sparked your interest here as you looked at what
Well,
was written?
so much of the pain that I see that happens within organizations that I'm working with comes from the fact that middle management is not set up for success. And so as a result, the C-suite, as you referenced, is frustrated with them, and then middle management is frustrated because they're not getting the support. They don't necessarily know how to lead because they've been put in this position. I see this happening all the time, where you have, your best employee, and I'm coaching several of them. The best employee is promoted because you need someone to step into a leadership role. Well, the problem is that they're the best at doing the job, but not at managing people doing the job. They're completely different skill sets. We hire often frontline employees to do tasks, right? To do the job. So those are oftentimes technical skills or customer interaction. Yet managing people doing that is completely different. And what happens is so many dynamics. The one manager that comes to mind that I'm working with right now was just a top performing manager, hardworking, dedicated, committed, and he has a really hard time letting go of that job because there's fulfillment in it. He feels good about that. He's not so sure about the management part and working with people. And there's frustrations in dealing with all the people dynamics. And so that sense of accomplishment comes from doing the job. And so they revert many times back to just stepping in doing the job. And what that does is then it signals the frontline employees that, oh, hey, I don't have to work as hard, and my manager's going to come in and step in and do my job. So why should I really work that hard? And as a result, they do less and less. The manager ends up doing more and more, and the middle manager gets frustrated with their frontline employees because they're doing less and less. But they actually created that because they didn't know better, and that's where they get a lot of their self worth. And so, and I could talk about that dynamic forever. Then you put them in that position and don't give them the skills or the tools or the training to really, really succeed. And so we're not setting our people up for success. So that's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about it. And I see the value that they bring, because I believe, Christian, that when the C-suite gets this right, when they invest in this level of management, it absolutely can transform an organization, because I believe that's where the greatest impact within organizations happen. Middle managers are affecting frontline supervisors and the employees that are doing the work that is bringing value to the organization. And if that's done well, great results can happen. Happy employees, happy, they're engaged, they're bringing revenues in, they're interacting with the customers, they're doing a great job. The C-suite is happy. Why did you bring it up? I mean, why did you recommend it?
I thought it was really interesting. I know you've got some of the graphics there, because there were a couple of tables or charts or something like that were included in the article from the McKinsey study. And one of the, well, I guess the most often mentioned item as a negative item by middle managers was just dealing with the organizational bureaucracy, and you often feel like a cog in this big machine, and all you're doing is just you're just keeping that machine operating. You don't really have a lot of fulfilling responsibilities. And I remember this early on in my career, Spencer. I was line staff doing technical customer support for a software company, and then was asked if I wanted to take on a management role. So above kind of the supervisors, and become the manager of their training area. And I thought, hey, it's a great opportunity. I get a raise. This is fantastic, and I get an office, and I was pretty stoked about it.
All the inducements to take the job, right?
Yeah, and that it sounded great, and I got in there, and this is not to be critical of anybody in that company, but I didn't get any kind of training at all. And I really felt like what I was doing was just approving people's expense reports and, doing performance reviews. And I was just not doing work that I really felt personally was fulfilling. And when I looked at the work that my employees were doing, they were out in the field, they were consulting clients, and they were doing fulfilling work, and it wasn't a problem motivating them or anything, because the work was really good.
Yeah.
After a period of time, I said, you know what? this management title, this office, it's not worth it. I will go back into a cubicle as a consultant and in the same company. And so I resigned from that position and actually demoted myself to becoming a consultant. They hired another person to come in and be the manager of that department,
What did
just
they
because
say
I
when you
I
did that?
felt
How did they
so
respond?
unfulfilled.
I,
You know,
I hear that, and I believe that. And what did management? How did they respond to your move?
they were totally fine with it. They were a little curious because, like, well, who does that? Who says, I actually just want to be demoted? But the
So
other
this
thing
is a
that
cautionary tale, right? I mean, because as I put up that graphic, and I'll do it again. These are the things that hamper managers, right? 44% just have to deal with bureaucracy, and including just meetings, unnecessary or overly long meetings, that they have to do some of these things that prevent them from doing the work that is fulfilling and exciting. Now, obviously, there has to be the administrative work done, right? But you bring up a very, very important point. I mean, if you have underperforming employees, you don't know how to manage them. You've got senior leaders that are coming in and doing seagull management. They're coming in, flying in, and pooping all over everybody, and then leaving, and you got to clean up the mess, or they're just creating negative dynamics on the team, or you have people being laid off, and so you're doing more with less. You have just so many workload demands, especially after COVID. We have downsizing, we have uh, managers that they're increasing responsibility. Add to that, Christian, now you have hybrid, so they have to manage these new dynamics. So I'm coaching another middle manager, is actually a regional manager, but basically manages a small frontline team. And this is an individual that's been with the company a lot of years, and they're really struggling with the new dynamics because the old company was just all about, hey, just you do the work. It's tick the boxes. It's all very mechanical, right? I mean, and if somebody quit, they just plugged in a new person. Well, that's not happening anymore because plugging new people in is not a given anymore. They have to create an environment where people want to stay and work. And that means now the managers actually have to be really good at human skills. And this is a manager that struggles with that. Grew up, didn't have the upbringing that there was vulnerability or emotional connection to anything or anybody. And so now trying to have just real conversations gets this person in trouble because they don't have the emotional intelligence. So when they do interact, they say the wrong things, and then they get backlash. And so now they're like, oh, now I can't have any personal conversation. This is reinforcing my just get back to the mechanical stuff that I'm comfortable with. Well, that's creating a problem for this team because they're not able to onboard and bring the best people on, and management doesn't have faith that they're able to manage the new people that they give them. It's a terrible conundrum, but they're required to have all these human skills and to interact and to lead and to inspire and to motivate when they're not inspired. I mean, you're talking about your situation. How hard is it to inspire and motivate people when you're just drained and exhausted?
Well, it's absolutely true. I mean, you're sitting there and, like I said, you're looking at expense reports, you're approving flights, you're just, things that are within your realm of purchasing power.
Right.
Uh, and it's just not inspiring, motivating work. One of the things that I found really interesting looking at this article, Spencer, was, and I'm sure you've had clients that have had this challenge recently because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Uh, the You talked about it, the discrepancy between the technical skills and, as our friends in PMI call it, the power skills or the soft skills, right?
Right.
And how that became even more predominant post COVID because middle managers were not only expected to manage the performance of the people, but really to get more, I don't want to say involved in their lives, but to understand them more as people. And there's a skill gap there
There
because
is.
these middle managers were not trained for that kind of interaction with employees. It was very much just, weekly status reports, or, you have your 1 hour meeting and that's it. And now you're on a Zoom call, which was a new thing. We weren't managing teams on Zoom before.
And you don't know how to
And
do
not only
that.
that, you're dealing with people's, challenges outside of work. And
And
that,
they're just not equipped for that.
yeah, just totally not equipped.
I think part of the problem is, Christian, is that the C-suite doesn't really understand. I mean, they don't have always visibility into what management is doing, and they just are interested in the bottom line. And so a lot of times you see executives saying, well, we've got to flatten our organization. We've got to get rid of those middle managers to increase the bottom line and just save expenses, because we don't need people approving flights and all that sort of stuff. We need to get rid of a layer of management. So you've seen that with Mark Zuckerberg at Meta. You've seen that with Elon Musk with Twitter and X. Even you remember Zappos, that company. Remember Tony Hsieh? His philosophy was to create what's called a holacracy. Do you remember that? Have you heard of that concept of a holacracy?
That's vaguely familiar, but yeah, why don't you tell us what the holacracy is?
Well, his idea is he wanted employees, the organization to be completely flat. I mean, I love his idea of. I went and saw his office, and it's right there on the floor with everybody else. He didn't have a corner suite, and I love that idea of being, plebeian with everybody else, just kind of regular person. I think that's a great example. But I struggled with the idea that he had, just eliminate all management, and people will lead themselves. In my experience, they don't, because they don't know how, or they don't have the vision, or they don't have the goals, they don't have uh, you still have to be able to imbue them with the direction and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And yeah, you could have somebody just put them in a job and do that job, but how do you measure performance? And performance is more than just productivity. And I talk about this all the time. I mean, a team exists to create results, to sell shoes in Zappos case, right? And Tony wants to sell a lot of shoes. He did. When he was alive and when he was running his company. And but to do that, you've got to create sustainability. So his idea was to create this environment that everyone just managed themselves and wanted to be there to create this positive environment. And it backfired, and I thought it would, because people, I believe, just like you said, there are actually some people that don't want to lead. Not only do they want to not lead others, they don't want to lead themselves. They just want to show up and do the job and do the work, and sometimes they need help with that, and they need direction, because things change, the market changes, the economy changes, the competitors changing. Who's managing that? Who's making sure that the new data and information is being disseminated, and new learnings and new approaches are being incorporated into how you operate? If there's nobody leading that, then you have chaos, and everybody doing what they want, and going in different directions. And if everyone's going in different directions, things fall between the cracks. But to get aligned, you need leadership, you need vision, you need direction. And I do an exercise it's one of my favorite exercises to do with my clients. And I've done it with small companies. I've done it with big groups of over 100 people. And what we do is we organize. It's a process called "If Chairs Could Talk," and we have everyone organized in groups of 5 and 6 people. And it's kind of structured as a pyramid. So you have a chair A, and everybody's facing forward, and chair B right behind chair A, so close enough that the knees almost touch. And then you have chairs B, C, D, and E, and maybe F on the back row. Now, there are extremely strict lines of communication, and I give everybody a packet with instructions and a notepad and a pen. And the instructions are they have 15 minutes to solve a problem. And the only way that they can communicate is through the notepad. So no talking, they can't turn around, they only have to face forward, and there are strict lines of communication. So A can communicate with B can communicate with A. Now B can communicate with C, D, E, and F. And so what happens is that everybody has their instructions. I don't want to give it away, but they start passing notes, and that person in the B seat becomes overwhelmed because C, D, E, and F can't talk with each other. They can only talk with B. And so the notes just come furiously, and they're on the back row. They're not getting any information. They don't know what's going on. And B's frustrated because they don't know what's going on. A has all the answers, but thinks everybody else knows what's going on, and so they don't give him all that information. And it's so funny because we'll have CEOs. Uh-oh.
What happened?
It says continue without Spencer. Streaming error.
No.
I don't know if it's Facebook had an error or whatever, but so we just lost Facebook.
Sorry, Facebook.
Sorry, Facebook. Anyway, so what happens is that we'll have a CEO of an organization that gets on the back row or gets in that B seat, or sometimes even in the A seat. It doesn't matter where they sit. They have all kinds of ahas because if they're sitting on the back row, they're realizing, hey, my vision is not getting there. It's not coming to the end of the row. And when I'm in that B seat, I'm completely overwhelmed. And we do this process for 15 minutes, Christian. And then we spend 45 minutes talking about what happened and how this relates to the organization. And so many ahas happen. And the takeaways are so powerful. And it's not just that the A represents the CEO. It could represent the customer. It's whoever has the most information, right? And so the B person is whoever they refer that information to. That's that middle man or middle person, middle woman. And what do they do with that information and the responsibilities that they have? But so often we underestimate the pressure of middle management. We discount that and the value that they bring and the importance that they have in the organization.
So what do you do to rectify it, Spencer? I mean, you go through this entertaining exercise and educational exercise to show how challenging it is for middle management. So what are the remedies that come out of that?
Well, I mean, for this exercise, one of the things we talk about is, what chair am I in, and recognizing what chair you're in and what responsibilities you have based on that chair that you're in. And I think for the C-suite, one of the remedies is to understand the potential for positive impact that middle management can have. So that's the first thing is understand the value and set them up for success. Know that just because you have a good employee, that doesn't mean they're going to make a great manager. So make sure that you're promoting the right people for the right reasons. And then when you do so, make sure you're giving them the tools that they need. Give them the time to be able to prepare and to learn and to grow. And so what some of my best clients do is they allow me not only to am I coaching the senior executives, but I'm coaching those middle managers. Sometimes the C-suite and senior executives just don't have the time to coach and mentor, but they really need to spend more of their time mentoring and coaching. And if they can't do that, bring some outside help into coaching them, making sure that help is aligned with the mission and vision of the organization, so that you then become an extension of management. And that's what I do for some of my clients. And so that's one. Those are some things that you can do.
Okay, I have a question for you on along those lines. When we talk about the you've mentioned it a couple of times, we tend to promote people who
Yeah.
are good technically, may or may not have the people skills needed, because sometimes they're great technically, but they also have fantastic interpersonal leadership communication skills, but sometimes do not. And I find it curious, if you look at job postings on LinkedIn or Indeed for middle management positions, like senior project managers or director or regional manager kind of positions, particularly in areas that are that have technical elements to them, whether they're engineering or manufacturing or pharmaceuticals or technology. Uh, if you look at the qualifications, they are
Right.
very heavily technical,
Right.
right? So I think it starts there. Like when you're looking for people, the way you are drafting this position, the way you articulate it, you already are showing a bias toward these technical skills, which they might be needed in a pinch if a team member falters or somebody leaves and the manager has to step in and do something, or they might be needed, or they're perceived that they're needed because the team, the thinking as well, in order for this person to have any credibility to lead the team, he's got to have all of these technical accomplishments, otherwise they're not going to have any faith in him, or they're not going to feel like this person can relate to me because they don't know what I go through on a day-to-day basis. But I think that this problem starts right at the beginning, from recruiting for these positions, because whether it's promoting in-house or whether it's going outside, the way that that job description is written, generally speaking, weighs technical skills more heavily than the interpersonal, the leadership, and the communication skills.
100%. And, I think that's a bias that has developed over time just from our educational system. I think how we score, uh, tests, it's, you have to have that technical knowledge. It's easier to measure than are the human and emotional skills. And so because it's easier to measure, that's what so many of our standardized tests are able to measure. And then I think over years, we've just the nomenclature that we use, hard skill versus soft skill, is somehow says that a soft skill is not as important as a hard skill. Now that's a complete misnomer, and I believe those terms come from the U.S. military when they would, develop the skills to, for example, drive a tank or fly a plane or shoot a gun. Those are hard skills, right? Being able to fix the equipment. Those are all hard skills. The soft skills they considered to be how do you organize a squad, a platoon, a team, and motivate them and engage them. Now, from the Army's perspective, which is more important? It was actually the soft skills. But think of it: you have hardware and you have software to run the hardware. Which is more important? But over the years, for some reason, we've given, the hardware is more important. No, you've got to be able to run the system with the software, with the skills, with the human skills. And so now you've got managers that are having to do employee reviews based on these, technical skills, and they're just not, having the impact that they want to have, and so they don't know how to measure the human skills. We want our people to be able to have a great atmosphere on the team. We want them to have great communication and interaction. We want them to develop certain behaviors. So one of the things I help my clients do is not only hire for technical skills, which is important, but I get the executives all together and we identify what are the behavioral skills that are necessary for that position. We take the best people that have been in that role in the past, if they're still there, if we have multiple people in that position. We take the C-suite's perspective on what behaviors they need to be successful. we put that all together and we analyze it and we see how different perspectives each team member has, we get aligned. We say, okay, this is what is going to help this person be successful. And as we interview, we compare against that template, not to discriminate, but to see how they compare. And if they're out of alignment, do they have some compensatory skills or behaviors that we can accept? And so those are some ways that we get around that, and that we get smarter about how we hire. Because you're right, we're still hiring in an antiquated way because that's all most HR companies know what to do. So it says in this, the stats, only 20% said that their organizations help them to be successful. And if you look at my data from worldwide surveys and assessments, only 12% of teams are high performing. Now, there are elements of the team that perform high, but if I'm talking about moving up to continuing to be able to produce at high levels, sustain that, have people love their job, they feel challenged, they're growing, they handle conflict well, they're able to adjust and change. Only 12% are able to do that. And it's because we're not hiring people the right way and we're not setting them up for success once they are there.
Well, I think that's absolutely right, Spencer. And I want to transition that or segue that into another one of the tables of metrics that are in the article. Again, this was originally the source of the data is McKinsey, and a study they did on McKinsey on this, what managers want. And I found the top two items to be quite interesting. One, because in a certain way, you're like, duh, of course that's what they want. But on the other hand, there is a perception that middle management is a place for underperforming people to go hide in an organization, right? Like right? Like so there's this stereotype of the middle manager that doesn't really do anything, doesn't really have an impact, and is perfectly okay with that. Like, yeah, I'm just going to be over here in my corner, just doing my thing, and nobody cares. But what this is saying is actually the people that are in these roles, they want more autonomy to make decisions, more
Everybody wants more.
responsibility.
Everybody wants more success. Everyone wants to win, I believe.
Yeah, and I think this, what this is showing is it's kind of, tearing down that stereotype of the middle manager as the person who's not motivated and doesn't want to do anything and just is happy, hiding out in that little corner of the organization. And because, what they're showing here is more than money. Really what people want is they want autonomy, they want the ability to make decisions, and they want more responsibilities, right?
Wow. So more responsibilities means that so what happens a lot of times if you've promoted a middle manager and they are underperforming or they're not getting the job done, then you've got managers feel like they have to micromanage, and so they're like, that they're not. I think this is one of the things that needs to really be addressed within organizations as well, is that we're not giving our people enough freedom. And how do you do that? Well, you set the direction and the overall organizational goals, but then allow each department the freedom to develop how they're going to achieve what's expected of them. So instead of saying, here's what you're going to do, here's what you need to do, it's like, all right, here's the overall objective. Here's our, whether that be a revenue objective or a market share objective is, and then go to each department and say, okay, tell me how much of that do you feel like you're able to own, and how do you want to achieve it, and let them come up with that plan within their own teams. That's the freedom and flexibility that we need to give. The overall vision, direction, and major objectives come from the top, but how that's achieved at the departmental level needs to be, the ownership needs to be given there. Well, that means they need to know how to do that as well. So you need to make sure that you're coaching them and training them and developing them so that you have the confidence that they can do that. And if they don't just step in and do it for them, because that creates everything that we were talking about. That creates a lack of trust from the middle manager, feeling like, hey, I'm not valued, so they do less and less, and you feel like you have to step in and do more and more, and that creates a virtuous cycle that ends up in failure in that position. And then we have this self-fulfilling prophecy. I see middle management's useless, or they don't do anything, and it just, we create that ourselves with poor leadership all the way from the top.
And I also think, Spencer, it's not just giving them the autonomy to do things amongst themselves within the department, but also giving them the permission to operate cross-functionally. Because oftentimes you have these bottlenecks from middle management because you've got different teams and different departments that aren't really allowed to talk to each other, right? So if they need to communicate from department A to department B, you got to go up through this channel to the head of department A, who takes it to head of department B, who then funnels the information down there. And so you've got these bottlenecks, and you have that pressure, just like you talked about in your exercise with that puzzle. You know, people C, D, E, F couldn't talk with each other. They just could talk with B, if I understand the exercise correctly. And
That
so
is
they,
correct. Yeah.
right. So if they're given that permission, and sometimes, the way that we're set up in our organization, we put these blockages there,
And that's
sometimes
exactly why those
intentionally.
lines of communication exist in the process, to duplicate the barriers to communication that exist within organizations.
So I think it's a fantastic exercise, and more these days, an individual department on its own may not be able to come up with the optimal solution. They really need to work with other areas of the organization, and maybe even outside with other stakeholders. And so you got to encourage and facilitate that kind of cross-functional communication, I think, to be successful.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm really excited to have a new client interaction coming up this month, later in Florida. I'm really excited about it. But it's a company that the CEO gets it, and this individual has a team of great people, but they are now part of the senior staff. And this is a company that's still fairly young. I mean, they've been in business for 20 years. But what's happened is now he's given promotions to these people, and they're in senior seats. They have senior titles, and yet they still have a siloed mentality. So, kind of what you're talking about, they're only worried about their departments instead of, the team on the back should be the organization, not my department. And they're excited to have, so he's actually given them authority. Well, now that's created a new problem that he needs to fix and train, is that he's given them that flexibility, but instead of them communicating with others or making decisions that include others, they're making decisions in silos. I now have the authority, I now have the budget, I can do whatever I want within my team. And they're not understanding the consequences of actions that they make and how that's impacting anybody else. And so he wants to empower them to do exactly what you're talking about. Start reaching across to the other departments and work more collaboratively in the best interest of the client and the organization. But these problems persist everywhere, and they need to be addressed. It's just part of human nature. It's part of the development. They don't teach the skills necessary for organizational success in college most of the time. And so who is it that runs these companies? A lot of times it's just entrepreneurs, right? And who learned how to lead from whom? From the greatest generation who fought 2 world wars, right? And it was just go do what I tell you to do. And there's, in today's world, we need managers and leaders that can connect with people for all the reasons we've talked about, because we live in the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and it's stressful, it's anxious, we need to consider mental health and well-being and work-life balance, and that means we need to be able to have human conversations. We can't just hire robots and be robots. Even though, we hear about AI taking jobs, that there will always be a need for these soft skills, for these human skills, for the interaction strengths to motivate and encourage and inspire teams to do more, to be more, to go farther.
Well, Spencer, this has been a fascinating conversation for me. I've learned a huge amount, but I don't want to cut us off without first asking if there are any other critical points that you see here with middle managers that we haven't yet addressed.
So I want to share one point. I was talking to one of my other coaching clients in Europe, and this is a project manager who is doing absolutely terrific. On her own, a lot of times some of the women managers I work with are so motivated to learn and grow and be the best that they can be. Well, this project manager has 7 direct reports that are project managers. And it's interesting that you say that some people want to know that their manager can do the job. She actually has one person on the team challenging her. I need to see you managing projects. And she's like, no, my job is to manage you. And it's a completely, she's having to teach him the difference between doing the job and managing people doing the job. And she's doing a great job at that, but she's had to navigate some very tricky relationships, especially coming from a man who thinks they deserve her position, and wanting to challenge her in these ways. It's really, really an interesting dynamic, and she's doing it very, very well. But one of the things that we're talking about is just her ability to adapt to different situations. And I shared an article with her that was from 2000. It was written by Daniel Goleman in the Harvard Business Review. It's called, what is the article called? It's called, it's how it's, I can't even remember it. It's about leadership and emotional intelligence and being able to adapt your leadership style. And this article was referencing that 1/3 of financial results, and this is based on research, I believe, by the late Harvard psychologist David McClellan, 1/3 of financial results come from the climate on the team, the culture on the team, the human interaction on the team, the esprit de corps, how we get things done. And she it was so funny. She says this article is 23 years old, and she works for a major organization that you would know if I were to say it. She's like, we don't know this stuff. Or if we do, it's not understood or even talked about or focused on in an organization like this. And most organizations don't. They don't understand the impact on the bottom line of developing their middle managers. And the few that do have a huge advantage over those that don't. 23 years later, and still people are like, this is a mystery. I need to develop my human skills, really. So I think that's what I just want to stress how important it is to invest. Stop giving the middle finger to middle management. Embrace them, teach them, help them, encourage them, and give them the skills, and watch what happens with your teams being happier, more engaged, and more productive. That's what I would say.
Well, I think that's a fitting conclusion to this conversation, Spencer. I really appreciate you carving time out of your busy schedule, not just working, but unpacking your house and getting settled and doing all of that amazing stuff. So you've helped so many organizations. Hopefully there are people that are listening right now. I'm sure there are people that are listening right now who are or watching saying, gosh, my organization is suffering from these same issues. How can they be fixed? My recommendation is call Spencer or talk to Spencer. So Spencer, if people want to know how to fix their middle management situation so their organization can perform at a higher level, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn, just Spencer Horn. And Altium Leadership is the name of our company. You can check out our website, altiumleadership.com. Thank you, Christian. You're always so gracious and kind. And you know what? We've been doing this now for a couple years, and I don't even know what episode we're on, 106. But I'm so grateful that you continue to do this with me. And here's what's happening around the world. People are starting to wake up to the qualities of Christian Napier and everything that you bring. And everyone I talk to, they're like, yeah, Spencer's okay, but it's that Christian guy. He's I was just talking to Melissa. It's like, yeah, you two together are amazing. And I know, because Christian has all the strengths. You have all the strengths that I don't have. And what an asset you are to your organizations. How do people find you and find out more about how to get a hold of you?
Well, gosh, Spencer, I'm over here. I'm flattered and blushing after that very deep tissue ego massage that you just gave me there. People, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just look up for Christian Napier. You'll find me there, and happy to connect with anyone and help any way that I can. So thank you so much for joining us the day after Labor Day here in the U.S. Listeners and viewers, please like and subscribe to our podcast, and we'll catch you again soon.